humble, forgiving, loving. For more than 1 billion Catholics around the world, Pope Francis was those things and more. Tonight, a look at his legacy, how he changed the Church and brought more faithful into the fold. Remembering Pope Francis, a holy life.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dan Manarino from PIX11 in New York City. And right now, tens of thousands of Catholics are flocking from all corners of the earth to Vatican City, all to say one last goodbye to Il Papa, Pope Francis. He died at the age of 88 after leading the Catholic Church for 12 plus years. His ascension to the papacy and his actions as Pope, no doubt historic. With more on what Pope Francis accomplished, his beliefs and humble beginnings, here's John Muller.
Saecula saeculorum.
Pope Francis was a trendsetter from day one. Born Jorge Mario Bergoglio in Argentina, Pope Francis was the first pope ever from the Western Hemisphere, the first from South America, and the first from the Order of Jesuits. As a young man, he worked as a bouncer and a janitor before studying to be a chemist, only to feel the pull of the Church. Ordained a priest in 1969, he rose to cardinal in 2001. Following the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI, he was elected pope in 2013. His reputation always preceded him. Known for his humility, Pope Francis preached forgiveness and mercy, focusing on the poor. He was instantly less formal than popes who went before him, making that clear when he chose to reside in a guest house rather than the papal apartments. Pope Francis did maintain the traditional views of the Church regarding things like abortion, celibacy for clergy, and the ordination of women. But he made headlines saying the Church should be more welcoming to members of the LGBTQ community, even favoring legal recognition of same-sex couples. He was never shy about taking a stand, critical of capitalism and consumerism. He pushed for action on climate change and supported the causes of refugees in Europe and Central America. He was not without controversy, most notably the church sexual abuse scandal. Even some clergy within the Church called for his resignation for failing to take action against former Cardinal and Newark Archbishop Theodore McCarrick. Francis did not resign. He apologized to sexual abuse victims, launching investigations.
Pedimos perdón. We ask forgiveness for the times that, as a church, we did not show the survivors of whatever kind of abuse compassion.
Pope Francis played large on the international stage. One of his biggest accomplishments, helping to restore diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Cuba. He traded barbs with then-presidential candidate Donald Trump in 2016, saying Trump was a person who only thinks about building walls, which is not Christian. Trump fired back at Francis for questioning a person's faith. The two later met at Vatican City, discussing how to combat terrorism, suffering, and radicalization. At the start of 2023, Pope Francis presided over the funeral of his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI.
Father, into your hands we commend his spirit.
It was a historic event, the first funeral for a Pope Emeritus in modern times, and the first ever funeral for a pontiff who resigned. Francis then made headlines calling laws that criminalize homosexuality unjust. He urged the Catholic Church to distinguish what's a sin but not a crime. And he went on to approve blessings for same-sex couples. Later in 2023, Pope Francis convened the Synod on Synodality, described as the culmination of his papacy. The most controversial issues were to be considered, including allowing women to be ordained as deacons, as well as welcoming LGBTQ Catholics. Ultimately, the Vatican put the brakes on these discussions. Good Friday of 2024 saw the Pope's frail health in the spotlight, the pontiff skipping the traditional Good Friday procession while recovering from his winter-long bout of respiratory problems.
Io te battesso nel nome del Padre, del Figlio e dello Spirito Santo.
Pope Francis rallied for Easter Sunday celebrations in St. Peter's Square, leading 30,000 Catholics in prayer,
Et benedictio Dei omnipotentis,
calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and a prisoner swap between Russia and Ukraine. Even with all his efforts on the world stage, Pope Francis made his biggest impression in his simple words and their tone. They gave hope and inspiration to hundreds of millions around the world. Rather than strict doctrine, he preferred to preach more of mercy, tolerance, and love. Above all, he will be remembered for his humility.
an unprecedented welcome in America.
You remind us that the Lord's most powerful message is mercy.
Catholics flocking to 3 East Coast cities to be in the presence of Pope Francis.
Whenever you have so many thousands of people together, I mean, the excitement, the energy that resonates there, it's just unbelievable.
A look back at his only visit to the United States, when remembering Pope Francis, a holy life continues.
Welcome back to Remembering Pope Francis, a Holy Life. In September 2015, Pope Francis left Rome to head to North America for the first time in his life. After making the 3rd official papal visit to Cuba, he traveled to the United States. And once here, he was greeted by swarms of Catholics and America's most powerful political and religious figures. Here's Mary Murphy to take us through that historic trip.
To see Pope Francis arrive at St. Patrick's Cathedral was awe-inspiring. A sea of cell phones snapped him on Fifth Avenue not long after he'd landed at JFK. School children there wanted a piece of history.
Oh yeah, I got a selfie! We love you! Oh, we love you!
The pontiff was even gifted a Pope doll, and his image dominated many social media platforms.
It's all over. It's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's been on Snapchat.
Yet Cardinal Timothy Dolan remembers Pope Francis was a little overwhelmed on his first visit to North America.
My best memory of Pope Francis in New York was how startled he was by New York City. He had never been here before. I can remember in the car coming in from the heliport, and he said, "What are all those big buildings?"
Stephanie Gabeau of White Plains was blessed by the Holy Father by the cathedral's main altar.
I said, "Bendiciones, Papa." That means blessings.
And did he kiss you?
Yes.
He kissed you on your head?
Yeah, on the forehead, and then he gave me a hug.
And what was that like? What did that feel like?
Oh my God, it was amazing.
Earlier that same day, Pope Francis had spoken to a joint session of Congress in Washington, D.C., about striking a balance between capitalism and helping the poor.
We must not be taken aback by the numbers, but rather view them as persons, seeing their faces.
President Barack Obama and his family had greeted the Holy Father at Joint Base Andrews 2 days before, as Francis stepped off the jet after a state visit to Cuba. James Ford was in D.C. when the Pope said Mass at the Immaculate Conception Shrine.
Well over 100,000 people saw him.
But I really put him on the pedestal today because he told the truth here in this country.
What do you want to say and what do you want to hear from the Pope?
I just want to thank him for shedding light on the poverty in the world and making us take responsibility for it.
When the Argentine-born pontiff took the podium at the United Nations, he spoke again of the disadvantaged, but also the need to protect our globe from climate change.
In all religions, the environment is a fundamental good.
It's a lesson Catholic school students in East Harlem were taking seriously, speaking to the Pope about their studies, even as one girl was starstruck after he patted her head.
I'm going to tell my mom never to wash my hair again. When we were singing the song, I almost couldn't sing because I was like, oh my gosh.
Francis was treated like a rock star in Central Park, but his second day in New York City had begun on a somber note, with a visit to the September 11th Memorial and Museum after he spoke at the UN. 6 religions were represented at the Holy Father's prayer service at the place where terrorists took down the Twin Towers. The Holy Father later celebrated a joyful Mass at Madison Square Garden, arriving with Cardinal Dolan on a golf cart.
When Pope Francis was holding that child in the middle aisle, the sheer emotion that were on the faces of the surrounding people was just amazing to see.
And there were more amazing sights in Philadelphia, our nation's birthplace, where the pontiff attended the World Meeting of Families and made a triumphant ride by Independence Hall. The Holy Father was applauded by young seminarians studying to be priests on his second day in Philadelphia, but had a stern word for bishops after meeting with 5 survivors of clergy or family abuse.
Dios llora.
God weeps.
He spoke to the bishops, he spoke to the pastors, he spoke to the big shepherds. They're the one that needs to be slammed.
One of the most moving events of the Pope's visit took place at a prison.
I stand among you, a pastor, a shepherd, but above all, as your brother.
The inmates had crafted an impressive chair from oak for Francis. He greeted each one of them, some reaching out to him for hugs.
What did that represent, what he did?
Love, kindness, acceptance.
And that was certainly a key message that Pope Francis delivered during his brief time in 3 U.S. cities. And as he peeked out from the airplane's window, just as the jet departed, we knew this humble Jesuit priest was a global leader we would never forget.
He touched the lives of so many around the globe, including those in America's most populous state.
He absolutely stuns me with some of the beautiful things he says.
Pope Francis's impact on California Catholics, next.
More than 6,000 miles separate California Catholics from their Holy Father, but nevertheless, their bond is strong. And with more on how Pope Francis inspired them, here's Jennifer McGraw.
Daily Mass dedicated to Pope Francis across Los Angeles. Prayers from a community with more than 5 million Catholic Angelenos. Father Raymond Reyes once meeting and having a personal connection with Pope Francis, now helping his students at Incarnation Parish in Glendale, who've prayed for the Pope as he had prayed for them in times of crisis.
En comunione con l'umanità.
Pope Francis was the first to hail from Latin America, connecting him to LA's largely Latin and Hispanic-based communities that make him relatable to so many.
Pictures of him never changing the shoes that he had for many years. I think things that, especially here as Hispanics, that we see, and the same language. You know, we know that he's from Italy and born in Argentina with roots back home, but for us, it feels just talking to him, a native Spanish speaker, we kind of understand different things that our parents made us understand as children.
A pope who inspired the Catholic youth. Just last year, St. Andrew's School in Pasadena sang alongside Pope Francis at St. Peter's Basilica over a several-day event, ringing in the new Jubilee.
The experience is always as profound as ever. When they're done singing, it's almost like I have to pull them down from the ceiling, you know, because they're floating on their enthusiasm and their joy.
Patrick Flahive is the music teacher and choir director for St. Andrew's. He's previously led Los Angeles' choir to the Vatican City, but this time was different.
And when he came in, even though his face was bright and happy, we could see that he needed constant care. You know, that's something that we all have to look at with great admiration too.
While Pope Francis had not made it out west, he aligned himself with many Californians' values, from social justice to welcoming the LGBTQ community.
You look favorably upon your servant, Pope Francis.
Near the end, Pope Francis said he was at peace, reminding faithful followers to lead with love.
I think for everyone that's viewing this is to not just pray for him, but pray for the whole world. I think that's what he will like to be able to have, and for end of division.
In January, the Pope also encouraged Catholics to pray for those who lost their lives or homes due to the devastating wildfires in California, saying, quote, "My heart is with the people of Los Angeles," end quote. The Pope also sent a telegram to the Archbishop of LA saying he was praying for the relief efforts of the emergency services personnel and imparting his blessing to all as a pledge of consolation and strength in the Lord.
Pope Francis prioritized creating moments of connection.
He showed himself to be a man of the basics.
Coming up, we delve into the human side of his leadership.
Welcome back to Remembering Pope Francis, A Holy Life. A pope wields immense power as head of the global Catholic Church and leader of the Vatican City state. But Pope Francis, for all that power, proved to be a man of the people who loved to connect with all individuals on a personal level. Ardina Baer has more on how His Holiness used this incredible gift.
Asking for prayers as he emerged from the balcony of St. Peter's on the night he was elected.
Pregate per me.
Pray for me. Prayer was often on the mind of Jorge Bergoglio growing up, even though he came later to the priesthood. An intellectual, he taught literature, philosophy, and theological studies in Argentina. He penned a book with his overriding philosophy in the title, True Power is in Service. He was ordained a priest at age 33. Then Pope John Paul II named him assistant bishop in Buenos Aires. 5 years later, archbishop, with his elevation to cardinal in 2001. But as he rose to the top, his lifestyle remained firmly grounded.
He showed himself to be a man of the basics and very concerned about being united to Christ.
Instead of living in the bishop's luxury residence, he chose a simple apartment where he cooked his own meals and navigated the city using public transportation. As Pope, Francis chose casual vestments, wearing his old pectoral cross from Argentina, shunning gold for a gold-plated fisherman's ring, and never wearing the customary papal red shoes, instead wanting to walk with the people as he led his flock. Chicago's Francis Cardinal George reflected on Pope Francis before he succumbed to cancer in 2015.
He's very clear about who he is as a priest of the church and what the church teaches, but he's also very close to people.
He cared for the sick, each year visiting hospitals, AIDS hospice, and prisons, washing the feet of the ill. In his first journey through St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis stopped for a sick man, an image hearkening back to Christ embracing the poor and ill. He held babies as the people held him up as the man who would make a difference.
I vescovi, I sacerdoti, I diaconi.
The climate changed for the Vatican with this new pontiff and his independent style. From the night he was elected, he hopped on a bus with his fellow cardinals, rejecting the private luxury car reserved for the Pope. And the next morning, without a security detail or a limo, he jumped in a VW and went out among the people. And the people had high expectations that he would right the wrongs of the church from sexual and financial wrongdoing.
Per mettere a fuoco il cuore degli eventi di questi giorni.
In a first, he faced the media on day one, challenging reporters to join him in the Trinity, a pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty.
When we come back, what's next for the Catholic Church following the death of Pope Francis?
As Catholics grieve the loss of Pope Francis, preparations are underway for his funeral, as well as the process to select his successor. So the Pope will lie in state at St. Peter's Basilica before a funeral mass is held. Pope Francis did ask to be interred at a smaller basilica in Rome, which means he will be the first Pope buried outside the Vatican in more than 100 years, and that should happen in 4 to 6 days per Vatican protocol. The papal conclave then begins 15 to 20 days after the Pope's death. Cardinals are locked inside the Sistine Chapel, where they vote until someone receives a 2/3 majority. Black smoke coming from the chapel signals a failed vote, while white smoke, which I was there for, means a new Pope has been elected, and that person then chooses a name and is introduced on a balcony overlooking a very, very packed St. Peter's Square. And Catholics are eagerly awaiting that joyous moment. That's all for our special Remembering Pope Francis, A Holy Life. I'm Dan Manarino. Take care.